Welcome to the Jockey Club, a podcast looking at the movie Let It Ride, one scene at a time. My name is Dan Delgado, and we're at historic Hialeah Park where one man is having the best day of his life.
I'm having a good day.
So come on in and hang out while we talk about this day and the greatest movie of all time, Let It Ride. Don't worry about that guy at the door. I've got you covered. You can even
take my seat to the Jockey Club.
Welcome back to the Jockey Club. My name is Dan Delgado. We are up to episode 11, which means that we are doing the 11th scene of Let It Ride. And really, it is the 11th scene according to me. Some scenes are going to be combined into episodes, so just keep that in mind. This is the scene where Trotter gives the tape to the trainer and the businessman. With me to discuss this scene is James David Patrick. James not only has 3 first names, but he's also the host of the Cinema Shame podcast and the writer of the official Netflix DVD blog. And if you're playing along at home, this is from minute 29:12 to minute 32:04. All right, now let's head on up to my usual table at the Jockey Club to discuss the 11th scene of Let It Ride. Okay, now, James, there's a very specific reason that I wanted you to do this scene in particular, and it's right at the very beginning of the scene, and I don't know if you caught it or if you didn't catch it, but it's when Trotter...
Is it the jingly fate music that happens?
It is not the jingly fate music, but yes, we will discuss that in just a moment. It's before the jingly fate. It's right around that time. It's just before. When he walks out of the bar.
Yes.
Can you imagine... or picture what is on the screen?
Oh, he walks out of the bar.
Yeah. It's something that you and I kind of have discussed. It's right. It's right.
His hands in his pockets. He grabs the tape.
It's above his head as he's walking out of the bar.
The bar sign.
The bar sign.
The bar sign up there.
Yeah. What do you know? What it says?
Does it say Marty's?
Yes, it does.
Oh, see, I didn't even look. I didn't even think about that. I rewatched it twice today. The whole scene, like pausing and looking at the screen and taking in all that mise en scène, and I didn't even notice it. I must have paused it after it was on the screen.
It's so barely noticeable. It's a terrible looking green awning, and I think it's orange letters. And you can barely notice it, but because you and I have been discussing it, I'm kind of looking for where it's going to say Marty's. And we can now put the Lucky Horseshoe Cafe to rest for good.
Well, I'm glad it's in there somewhere, you know?
Absolutely.
And maybe it featured more prominently elsewhere. But if that's what we get, I'm happy now.
Yeah, that's true. It could show up somewhere else in the movie. I have not done the close examination throughout the entire film yet.
I don't think there's any other shots outside the bar, though.
I don't think so. I'm a little surprised we got this one, to be honest. Okay, so then the next thing that happens is exactly what you're talking about, is the jingly, the chimes, the fate music that swells up briefly. It's telling us that something is going on with Trotter. What do you explain this?
It's a new timeline has been created.
Is this because he's got his 24 hours, his one good day that he's been looking for, and these fate chimes are letting us know, or it's pointing him in the right direction? Like, that's when he gets it's the moment of ideation for him. Oh, I'm not going to just go home. I'm now going to go over here.
Right. This is the moment that it's not just the one bet.
Yes.
He walks out. He's got his cash stuffed in his loafers.
Yes.
And he finds that tape in his pocket that he's still holding on to. And he taps the tape and he's like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. So he goes back to the track. But this is interesting because we've just had the conversation in the bar, and his line that ends that scene is, a winner knows when it's time to quit.
Yeah. But
it wasn't time to quit.
But he's really just going there with the idea of, I'm going to give these guys the tape.
Right. He has no intention He's not betting.
He's not betting. In fact, he's under the impression he's doing some sort of like a good thing. I'm going to give these guys this tape.
Right. It's like his goodwill offering. It's like, I just wanted to say thank you for speaking about your horse racing scams in sort of a public forum.
I know. This, if you think about it, this really is sort of an odd thing to do. Wouldn't you just toss the tape away rather than give it to these guys?
You just toss the tape and pretend it exists.
That's exactly right.
The conversation that he then enters into is sort of predictable in that Trotter, who is not exactly the criminal type, he may have transgressed a few times in his past, but he's not a criminal. And he goes to people who he knows for a fact are,
right,
if not criminals, in that little gray area, because they're manipulating horse races, and even the manipulation isn't in itself illegal. What they're doing, he goes in and he's a little bit afraid of them. You can see in his face he's nervous. The guy approaches him and talking about, this is the only tape, and he's not quite so comfortable at the first half of his conversation with the guy who is known as the trainer and the businessman.
Yeah, if you see Trotter, who yes, he's not a particularly intimidating looking guy.
And they reinforce this with the framing of the scene.
Yeah.
The scene in the conversation. Maybe we've skipped over some introductory business here, but we're moving on. So the way that Pitka films this scene is sort of a medium shot, and it forces the perspective of the three of them into very close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
He's condensed the space between them so that it looks like Trotter is almost a little child.
Oh, yeah.
Looking up at them from about 2 inches away.
Yes. They look way more intimidating than he does. He looks really tiny. They look really big.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how tall these gentlemen are, but they look like they're over 6 feet. Trotter looks like he's about 5'2" in this scene. Just no doubt about it. And so he comes up, and then he starts to, just imagine the explanation. I have a friend. He drives a cab. He has this weird hobby where he likes to record people in the back seat. Like, if you are these guys and someone is walking up to you with this tape after you've just fixed a race, in a sense, I'm a little surprised. Well, I guess it's because these guys are not hardened criminals. You almost get the impression that maybe this is the first time that they've done something like this because they're breathing such heavy sighs of relief as he's walking up. But if they were the wrong type of guy, Trotter might not be able to finish his story before he gets a...
No, he's not going to make another bet. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Right? He's getting a bump on the head, and he might be, waking up in a lake. Or not at all, right?
Yeah, it's a very, like you said, it's a very strange confession. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So in that context, it's, what are you doing exactly? But we need this narratively. It's a narrative convenience to propel the rest of the story forward, because we've just had a winner knows when it's time to quit. Like, he's decided that this is it. I've taken my winnings. I've got enough for blah, 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 blah. And that's good enough for me. But we need that extra kick to really compel him to become the second half Trotter, which is an entirely different animal from the guy who's walking away from the track.
That's absolutely correct. Yes. So yeah, this is true, because otherwise Trotter goes home and then the movie's over, or we watch him buy flowers for Pam and go have a nice dinner. Like, that's it. You're right. That's the end of the movie otherwise. But
and then it's like a marriage story.
Yeah.
With Cherry Gar.
So instead, these guys, and obviously here's actually a really good example of the fact that they're probably not really seasoned at doing this kind of thing, is that they really want to make Trotter happy. And so, hey, let me give you a tip on another horse.
They don't want him. They don't want, just in case.
Yes.
We're gonna keep this guy happy, because if he's happy, he's not gonna say anything to anybody about the things we're doing.
Yes.
So, hey, I have this other horse, and I have it on good authority because this guy, he's never had a grand. The only grand he's seen is the Grand Canyon. And if he's betting a grand, it's in the bag. He's not going to throw a grand away on a frivolous bet.
That's right. And this horse, let's just discuss this for a brief moment here, James. The horse is named Faith Healer.
Faith Healer.
What do
right.
what do we think about this name? What does it mean?
Well, we had Charity.
Yes, which was the gift to him, right?
Which was the gift.
Yes, self-explanatory.
And Faith Healer, I was kind of stewing on this today as well, like thinking about the names of the horses and what they could mean within the movie. And maybe this is a bit too far for Let It Ride analysis, specifically in terms of how the horse does function beyond Faith Healer. But you can take a look at Faith Healer and say, well, he's walking away. He's kind of disillusioned with the whole process because he's not blowing all the money at the track like everybody always does. Coming off this conversation with Marty in the bar,
right?
And he's telling the story about, this guy and this guy had to drop his pants, or I can't remember the exact line, but with them.
He rat-holed the 5. So awful. What an awful story to tell. Jesus Christ. Just meant to humiliate. Just an awful story. But go ahead.
But it's almost like he's had his faith, reinstated in the process of gambling, in the process of risking something to be great, which again, if we're putting this in the context of some sort of gambling addiction, this is a problematic healing.
Yes it is. Oh wow, yeah, it is a problematic healing. Absolutely.
I don't really want to look
That's
at
so
it that
funny.
way.
That is so funny.
We're trying to get him back to the track to blow all the money.
See, now I have always looked at the horses' names, like all of the horses' names, as though they were symbolic of, like, Charity, obvious, Faith Healer. Yes, this is what's going to get him back into the track and back thinking that, oh yeah, I'm in the game. This is what's going to, like, this horse is going to change how he is the rest of the day, because from this point on, he's not going home. He is not leaving.
Right. Well, it's like the gambling thing, right? So every bet could change your life. I mean, that's the little seed that gets planted in the gambler, that every hand, every race, everything you bet could change your life. And that's what he's getting at right here. In that Charity didn't change his life. He just analyzed the money he's got. He's got no money. Like, he's paying off parking tickets, he's buying something for his wife, and he's got, like, that's every dollar is spoken for, and there's nothing really left.
Pretty much, that's right.
It's like he hasn't won anything, really. That's how he's looking at it right now. He's walking away, having won $720, $710, but walking away even.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, that's right. He had spent it all as he's getting it. That's right. There's
before he's even left the track, he's got it all spent on things, necessities. So this is the faith that's being restored, is his faith in the gambling system. Now today is going to change his life. It's not going to perpetuate some sort of stasis.
This is true. This is exactly how I saw it. And, I kind of, let's see, I'm trying to think of how I thought of Fleet Dreams, but I did kind of look at that. It's like, okay, now we're kind of, not to be corny, we're kind of off to the races now. Now we're full speed ahead. And Hot to Trot, obviously, Hot to Trot is clearly, it's just the most obvious, it's the most obvious naming in the movie, right? But yeah, so I've always thought that all of the horses, all those names had specific meanings to them. All right, so now we're going to go.
So sidetrack here for a second. I was in a coffee shop earlier today, and I can't help but listen to, like, I'm supposed to be doing work. I was waiting to pick my daughter up from an event, and I tend to get involved, not actively, but I tend to listen closely when a conversation repeatedly catches my attention. And it was one of those elder gentlemen imparting decades of wisdom onto a younger human. I do not know familial relations, what their exact relationship was. The conversation was not clear in that regard.
Yes.
But he used the term spiritual compulsion on 3 occasions.
Spiritual compulsion. Okay.
And this weaved in and around politics and life. And it was a fascinating conversation. And I wish I could have documented some more specifics. But the only thing I wrote down was spiritual compulsion. And part of me was like, you know what? I could name a horse spiritual.
Oh, that's a good name. Yeah.
And I felt like it was a let it ride. It was like, it's a let it ride moment. Spiritual compulsion is this moment. It is him propelled back to the track. That's the spiritual compulsion. And that's why I heard this conversation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because if nothing else, those fate chimes that we hear throughout the movie, they feel supernatural. They feel somewhat spiritual. Like every time it happens, it's like, oh, and something will change for Trotter. He will realize something. He will notice something. He will tap the tape and then think, you know what? Before I go home, let me go ahead and do this one good deed, right? And so it's his good deed that's getting rewarded, right? Because it was his spiritual compulsion to give that tape away rather than to let it fall back into Looney's hands on accident, right? Looney asked for it back so he could record more people.
Right, and he would definitely go try and blackmail them. Like that's what Looney would definitely use that as a blackmail component to pay off his Packers debt. So really, so that makes my sense. I'm glad we're talking about this, you see, because now we have a reason for Trotter returning the tape.
That's true.
In that he's keeping it out of Looney's hands. The only way to be sure, like discarding the tape, he could find it. Smashing it, he could re-spool it.
Highly
He's protecting his friend.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's the next. No, it's a couple of scenes later. We have that conversation where Looney comes in and says, "Hey, with that tape, what do you think? We could blackmail them." And Charles like, "Look, I just spared you from a prison sentence by giving that away. You'd be grateful that I did this, kind of for you in a way. Like I don't know if Trotter was thinking that necessarily, but yeah, I'm sorry. What are we calling that again? Spiritual guidance?
Spiritual compulsion.
You know what? I am now typing this down. Spiritual compulsion. What category of film is Let It Ride? Oh, it's in the spiritual compulsion category.
And that chime is the universal marker for a spiritual redirection.
Oh man, is it ever? Like you hear chimes like that, it doesn't necessarily feel creepy. It feels like something kind of magical.
Something magical is about to happen.
Or something. Now it's something spiritual is about to happen, and it's going to guide you to go and give the tape back to the horse owners. Okay, so.
And while we're talking about Looney for a second, I had a relative to add from your conversation with your brother. You were talking about Looney relatives. And while I was listening to the podcast, I had one pop into my head immediately. All right. So it's his older brother from Philly.
Oh, okay. So it's a different guy. Yeah, go ahead.
It's his older brother from Philly, Burt Young.
Right. Burt Young.
Burt Young.
All right. No, Burt Young. You know who Burt Young kind of looks like, who's in this movie a little bit? It's the guy in the bathroom who's, this dollar will buy 4 minutes tuition. Like he looks like that guy a little bit to me, right?
You're saying to have some nice beer line? I'm like, Burt Young would say have some nice beer.
Oh, that is, you know what? You are so right. That's an excellent point.
It's not necessarily the physical appearance, but the attitude.
Attitude.
Burt Young is always sort of that character. But I think Burt Young, like in this Looney relative world,
right?
Like the real life Burt Young story kind of like slips in nicely because he was an actual boxer and had quite a good record. But then you're imagining that he was betting against himself and winning. Like winning the fight and betting against himself. Like that's the kind of loser that Looney is. So
he was crooked, is what you're telling me.
No. See, he's betting against himself, but then winning the fight. So
I'm so sorry.
That's that kind of loser.
I see. There's no way I'm going to win this. I better bet on the other guy, and then he wins. And
And then I don't know what I'm gonna do. How did I?
Why'd I have to knock that guy out? Jeez, now look what I did.
It's like he just fell into my fist.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so
that was just what was running through my head when I had to mark that down.
No. I love it. And if you could think of anybody else in the Looney family tree, feel free to just keep that in mind for any future.
I'll keep it rolling. I was thinking about it today a little bit, but I didn't come up with anything better than like older brother Burt Young. So
no, that I think it plays. Especially now that you mentioned just having like that line and Burt Young that have a nice beer, have some nice beer. It
have
just
some
plays
nice
together.
beer.
Have some nice beer. Now, the last and kind of maybe not the most important thing, but something that will definitely come into play in just a couple of scenes is, take my seat to the Jockey Club.
Take my seat to the Jockey Club.
This is a big
It's very
moment.
important to your podcast. It's very important to your podcast.
It's very important. It is. It's very important. Who knows what this podcast... Otherwise, this podcast...
What would it be called if not for that line? And I do have something to tell you about the script and that line.
Okay, well, all right. So, one, the podcast would have to be called Marty's, I think. or the Lucky Horseshoe Cafe. It'd be
which would be erroneously named. Lucky Horseshoe
exactly.
Cafe. That would be very confusing for the faithful.
And on episode 11, I'd realize, what a mistake I've made. Okay, and I don't know what the other thing I was going to say is, so tell me about the screenplay.
That line's not in the screenplay.
No. Oh, my goodness, really? Oh, wow. That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Take my seat to the Jockey Club. Not there.
It is not. So the character known just as Trainer was the guy that hands him the Jockey Club and the Jockey Club tickets and the tie or whatever. He says a few extra box seats. And that's it.
Box seats.
Yeah.
Not the same at all.
No.
But okay.
Nope.
Because now we've kind of tied it in because that is where we already know. That's where Trotter aspires to go. So it is just like the idea of Faith Healer. This is something that he's been looking for. He's been longing to get into the Jockey Club. That's earlier in the movie. We already know I belong in the Jockey Club, talking to guys with all their teeth.
Right.
So this is a big deal for the smile that comes on Trotter's face when he gives him, take my seat to it's the biggest smile he has in the movie.
It's a beautiful moment.
It really is. He's so happy. He's quiet, but he's so you can see that he's literally just beaming with joy.
Beaming. It's the Cheshire Cat grin, whatever you want to call it. It's the biggest smile you can if you're imagining the biggest smile Richard Dreyfuss could possibly plaster on his face. He's getting himself psyched up before the scene to really get the corners of his mouth really up there. And it seems to go beyond the laws of his physical face. He's so happy when he receives the Jockey Club and the tie. And that's when that scene turns. We talked about him being nervous and uncertain. And after they talk about the horse, who knows? Put a couple bucks on him. Who knows? Who knows? Exactly. Yeah. Take the seat. And that's when the whole thing shifts. His nervousness disappears. And this is the confident, giggly Trotter. And he's rather subdued, in terms of the movie for this scene compared to there's no Trotterisms, no big outbursts here. He's mostly playing it pretty straight until the grin. Yeah, the grin is fairly comical, I'd say. Yeah. But kind of wonderful at the same time, right? Because it just feels it's perfect. It's the perfect reaction. It's this culmination of a lifetime of work in his mind. This is what I've been building for. This is what I've been working for my entire life. It's the childhood dreams kind of smile. It's exactly. Someone you've aspired to be an astronaut, and at 10 years old, someone said, "Here, you may go to Mars," and you're like, "Oh, can I?" Yes, and it's to the Jockey Club at the track. As we're talking about, as you put it in terms like that,
Suddenly it's like, wow, what a very small accomplishment it actually is for you, Trotter, if you think about it, going to that Jockey Club. But he's so damn happy. Oh, man, I love it. And then he gives that fantastic thumbs up at the end.
The thumbs up as he walks away, like this, the glance back.
Yes, which I always remember that from the ads, like the TV ads, was that thumbs up. And I think it's in the trailer also, like kind of like at the end. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's right. This looks like it's fun. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Jockey Club. This episode was hosted and produced by me, Dan Delgado. Thank you to my guest, James David Patrick. Look for James's podcast, Cinema Shame, wherever you got this podcast from. There's also going to be a link to it in the show notes. Our theme music is from Epidemic Sound. Our cover art is by Sean Labrie. If you enjoyed this episode, and I certainly hope that you did, well then you can help out the show by giving a small donation by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link that's in the show notes. That's right, you just go ahead and click it and it brings you to a web page. It's a very simple thing and it makes me feel nice and warm inside. But if you're saying to yourself, Dan, I can't do that. I've got a strange tip on a horse that a mysterious man gave me, and I'm saving all my pennies for it. Well, then, of course, this is something that I understand. You can still support the show by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this. If it's on Overcast, if it's on CastBox, there's all kinds of places that you can leave a review. So go ahead, don't be shy, and don't leave anything less than 5 stars, because otherwise it hurts my feelings. Now, if you need, you can contact me through email. It is dan@moviemaker.com. I am on Twitter constantly. It's @_Dan_Delgado. And even better, I'm on the Repod app, which is a great way to not only to listen to podcasts, but to interact with podcast hosts like myself. Find it in your app store. Come on by and say hello. This has been Dan Delgado for the Jockey Club. And remember, sometimes you could be walking around lucky and not know it.